Hello and welcome to episode 68 of Loaded Sport. We've got a full house and full agenda. There's loads going on and loads been happening over this last week. So we're going to get stuck right into it. We've got the NFL reviewing week one and previewing week two. We've got the Singapore Grand Prix in Formula One. We've got Sean Strickland beating Israel Adesanya in the UFC. We've got the weekend of Premier League returning this weekend. That doesn't even make sense, but we're cracking on anyway. And of course, reviewing England's recent performances against Ukraine and Scotland. But first, I'm going to have to introduce the lads, and we're going to have our new usual game of Loyal Man. First up, Aggie, you're looking well, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Yeah, I'm feeling well. Been doing a lot of exercise lately, lost a bit of weight. So, yeah, feeling good within myself. How are you?
I'm good, mate. You might have to take over or retake over hosting duties because I don't know what that intro was. We've just spent 20 minutes all trying to get connected and sorted, so I'm trying to rush. But we'll calm down, we'll simmer down as we get into it and back to usual business. But yes, mate, you're looking really, really well and glad to hear that you're feeling it too. Next up, Kemp, the man. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, well, Mr. Dawson, Mr. White, man with the mic, again, glowing on this Thursday evening as we record Peek Behind the Curtain. Yeah, good, thank you, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, very well. Obviously, the gimmick is the football shirt. Tonight, I am repping AC Milan around 2007, and I've got the best defender of all time on the back, Maldini 3. What a player, and luckily, lads, he is the loyalist of men, but I won't be bringing him up as the player to kick us off. Before we do that, though, the man certainly by no means least, as always, Sam, how are you, mate?
Good, boys. How are we all tonight? Don't know why I've just asked you that. You've already gone around the room and done it yourself. But yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for asking. We've had a fresh week of week one of the NFL, so I am fully pumped and can't wait to discuss that later.
Yes, mate. I'm sure there will be plenty to say as there were some shock results, some teams that stood out, and some that we were expecting to do well that did anything but. But that will be probably around an hour's time when we get stuck into that. But like I said, first of all, we are going to play Loyal Man. I am up first this week. Aggie, you're going to follow me, then Kemp, and then Sam, and then obviously back round to me. Aggie, try to avoid Mario Melchiot because Kemp hasn't still, after all this time, hasn't got a clue who he is. So try and avoid him if you can. Wigan or Birmingham, mate, should be your shout. So I randomly generated a footballer earlier on today. I was going to pick someone, but it's just my mind went blank. So Aggie, Andy Cole is the opening player tonight.
Blackburn Rovers.
Chris Sutton.
Newcastle.
Bullshit. Check it, please, Kemp. Chris Sutton for Newcastle.
Checking.
He played for Birmingham as well, didn't he? At one point.
I was gonna go Celtic, and I went for Newcastle instead.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, Celtic would have been right. Celtic would have been right, but unfortunately Newcastle wasn't. Well, let's go again quickly because I've done you up a bit like a kipper there with Chris Sutton, but we'll carry on.
That's poor from me. That.
Go on then, Sam. You kick us off with this, mate. Give us a player.
Player is it? Damien Duff.
Newcastle.
Craig Bellamy.
Cardiff.
Fraser Campbell.
Manchester United.
Danny Welbeck.
Brighton Hove Albion.
Adam Lallana.
Liverpool.
Steve Finnan.
Steve Finnan.
Ooh, that's nasty. That's
a tough one,
Yes,
man, isn't it?
I could have fucking got so many players.
All the Liverpool players have ever.
He's a right bastard for that, isn't he?
Yeah, it's poor from him, that.
Hey.
No, it's good.
Is it?
I could tell you one easy.
Go on, then.
Fulham.
Fuck's sake. Okay, you took the headline.
Sam called bullshit.
Yeah, it's not calling bullshit. We can't fucking say it for each other, can we? I think that
You fucking said it.
No, I already fucked up on first, and I know with Chris Sutton, so I'll put my hand up for that one. Let's call it a day for this week.
Oh my god, that is probably the most shocking attempt of them all so far. So lads, let's do better next week. But we'll see.
Let's just fucking leave it at this point. To be honest, with you. It's not getting any better, is it?
We'll see. We'll see. But anyway, lads, we're going to kick off Unbelievable with football, and it's only right that we start with the England cap. 2 games, one on Saturday evening, European Championship qualifier in Poland against Ukraine, and then just this past Tuesday evening, a friendly versus Scotland at Hampden Park. A 1-1 draw to start that against Ukraine, followed by that 3-1 victory in Glasgow on Tuesday. Now, naturally, we're going to start with the Ukraine game. That was the competitive fixture of the two. I didn't watch it as I was away this weekend. So, Sam, I'm going to come to you, mate. If you can, you're shaking your head at me. So, Aggie, I'm going to come to you, mate. Tell us. Oh, you're shaking your head. Did anyone watch fucking England-Ukraine on Saturday or what?
I didn't watch
I
England,
fucking did. I've got shit to say. Shit to say, let me tell you.
There you go, then. Let me take a timestamp of when you're about to talk. England versus Ukraine, 1 apiece. Talk us through it.
Yeah, shocking team selection to start with. Maddison on the left, fucking atrocious. What's that all about? Goes on about how he didn't want to play Foden in centre midfield because he don't play there for his club. Don't think I've ever seen Maddison play off the left, but there you go. He played poorly. Vast majority of the team played poorly. Maguire in the team, again, we'll get on to Maguire in a bit more detail when we talk about the other game. Henderson, pathetic, adds absolutely nothing to the team, slows the game down. The difference you saw played between the lines when we played against Ukraine as opposed to when we played against Scotland, it was night and day. Maguire marked Guehi for the goal. It was his other centre-back, which obviously led Ukraine to scoring against us. Again, negative Gareth Southgate, absolutely no idea how to change things up and become more attacking, playing 2 sitting defenders against Ukraine. All respect to Ukraine, why do we need to play 2 sitting defenders against Ukraine? Surely they've not got that much of an attacking threat, that we need to... They've not got Andrei Shevchenko in his prime playing for him, have they? So why is it that we're doing that? Why can't we play 1 and then 2 in front? No idea. I mentioned about Declan Rice. I mentioned he struggled for creating chances for Arsenal. Exhibit A, as Theo Von says during the England game against Ukraine, created absolutely nothing. Simple pass down the left-hand side for Rashford in the second half that just went straight out of play. And then 5 minutes later, a wayward ball straight into the feet of the Ukrainian defenders. Much better sides at international level and in the Premier League are going to still sit in like Ukraine did. And it doesn't bode well for Rice that in that environment, with those players round him who arguably are better than the players he plays with at Arsenal, he couldn't do anything. He could not create one single chance from that position. And as a midfielder, it's his responsibility to do both, especially when you play next to Jordan Henderson. You've got to be the person creating those chances. And unfortunately, he didn't. No disrespect to Ukraine. None at all. They're obviously going through the fucking mill as a country, bless them. But if you can't break them down, when they're sat in and defending, then you've got absolutely no hope. 87th minute, you need a goal. Southgate makes an inspired substitution, brings off Saka, leaves Eberechi Eze on the bench, who we'll probably all agree is one of the most sort of pace, creative players that we've got to probably bring off the bench and make an impact, and a bit of an injection of sort of enthusiasm into that team. Brings on Conor Gallagher, who's never done anything for England and is doing precisely nothing for Chelsea ever since he went back. So, albeit, all in all, 1-1, Ukraine, pathetic, shameful, dismal, and another example as to why Gareth Southgate needs to fuck straight off.
It's funny that, because obviously Southgate's come out and said that weird thing about City and Pep not playing Foden centre mid, but yet he's brought off Saka, a right winger, and replaced him with Conor Gallagher, who plays centre mid for Chelsea. So I don't get that logic either. Conor Gallagher's not a winger, so why is he swapping him like for Saka as well? So that just doesn't really sit well with me either. That whole statement that come out about Foden not being able to play centre mid, someone released some stats afterwards saying he played about 70 odd games in centre mid for Man City over the course of his career, and I don't know. That's the start.
That's the start. Foden's played 76 games for City at centre midfield. Maddison's never played at left wing for Leicester or Spurs, as far as I'm aware. And obviously you've got Trippier playing left back, where he's played for I think he's played club football. I think he's been put at left back once. And Foden's played 76 times for City at centre midfield. But the problem is with Southgate, he's such a coward that he'll say things, and I don't know whether he truly believes them or he's just saying them to just pacify media and just giving himself an excuse as to why he's got to be so unimaginative and shit. And ultimately it's come back to bite him on the arse because it's very, very obvious that the stats don't back him up. So it's like I said to you boys, off air, he's either completely incompetent to a level that we didn't know he was possible, or he's a fucking liar and he's actually a detriment to the team at this point. I've said since the start, and we'll get onto it in a second when we talk about Scotland, I've said this England team, if they win, will be in spite of Gareth Southgate. It'll just be literally because he's there tagging along, and he'll not do anything to impact that. I am now at the point where I believe, and we'll again talk about this when we talk about Scotland, that Gareth Southgate being in that setup is actively detracting from these England players. And it's going to be harder for them to win because Southgate's there than if they didn't have a manager in the dugout at all.
Adam, I'm going to come to you for this one because I'm going to skip slightly past the on-field performance against Scotland and just follow up on the comments made about Foden. Following the Scotland game, Southgate was probably the angriest I've ever seen him when trying to defend Harry Maguire in terms of what he's done and the media attention that he's getting at the moment. Do you think that after the comments with Foden, he's never really been someone that's bit back at comments, and the comments that he's now made following the stick for Maguire, is Southgate potentially cracking under the pressure now? Fans and media seem to be turning on him after the majority of fans and media have praised him for what he's done with the team over the years. Now that's turning. Do you think he's maybe cracking under the pressure with the negative media attention that's coming his way?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I'm thinking of saying that while Sam and Kemp were talking. I thought, I know exactly what I'm going to say at the next point. He's under pressure. Everyone was, joining in with him, celebrating, happy with the fact we got to the semi-finals and the finals of the Euros and World Cup. So, yeah, he's obviously England's greatest manager. And then out of nowhere, everyone's turned on him and now he's panicking a bit. He knows that very soon he's going to be leaving the England post. Very soon, players are starting to turn on him a bit as well. And I'm pretty sure, whilst that's not showing on the pitch or in the media or anything, there's going to be players that are showing that sort of frustration. Phil Foden is potentially one of the best players in the Premier League at the moment, and he's not making it into his country for players like Jordan Henderson. And I'm really not quite understanding that sort of rationale behind it. People like Harry Maguire, and I know you've just mentioned briefly about what he said about the scrutiny of Harry Maguire. The bloke is not playing for Manchester United. That's the issue that people have with Harry Maguire being selected. He's not good enough for Manchester United. He's not good enough for England. I give him a lot of credit for the fact that he's turned down that move to West Ham to try and fight for his place. Because a player who's under that much pressure and that many issues from supporters fighting for that sort of position, fair enough. But getting into the England setup, despite not playing for Manchester United, for me is ridiculous. And I think Southgate's starting to crack under the pressure. Like you say, yeah, he's starting to feel the pressure.
His exact words were something like, "He's livid. He's absolutely livid," and it's a joke that Maguire that is getting this sort of stick. For the Scotland fans were basically just laughing at him all the way through the game before the own goal. The own goal went on, the place just absolutely erupted, and it just compounded.
They were cheering, weren't they? When Maguire got the ball, they were like cheering and kind of like, oh,
yeah. I've never ever seen anything like it before in my life. I've never ever seen a Scotland setup, home Scotland team or fans actively cheering the opposition. It's just unheard of. And that just shows how much of a joke he has been. So Southgate's saying it's a bit of a joke. He's right. It is a fucking joke. It's a joke that he keeps getting picked for the same fucking England team when he's not actually playing for club football. He's not good enough to get in the Man United side. The deal fell through with West Ham. He wanted to fight for his place, so fair enough. But at the same time, if you're wanting a fresh start, you have to take that. You think, right, I'm going to go and I'm going to do what's best for myself, and I'm going to take myself out of this situation. I'm going to try and rebuild my career. That should be on him to do that. It's not on anybody else to do that. And the fact that fucking Southgate's come out here and spat dummy out saying he's livid and it's an absolute joke. It's not a joke. It's not a joke. He deserves. Well, he doesn't deserve the stick. That's probably not what I'm trying to say. But Southgate is putting him in this position to fail, and that's on him rather than on Maguire. Maguire is just not good enough. They always say, don't they? If you put a toddler behind the wheel of a car and he goes and crashes his car, you don't blame the toddler for doing it. You blame the adult who put the toddler in the fucking seat in the first place. It's the same sort of thing what Southgate's doing for Maguire, for me. So, yeah, his comments after that game I thought were absolutely pathetic, and it's a shame, really, because England I thought was absolutely brilliant against Scotland, which is not something I've been able to say for a while. I thought they played really well. Great attacking football. As Kemp said, in spite of Southgate, it finally made a decent selection. It kind of gone a bit again, it's a friendly, so that's probably why he's done it, and he's not really strong enough to do that in a competitive match. But yeah, I'm really happy with the performance against Scotland, and them comments afterwards just kind of took the shine, took the edge off it, I thought myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with most of what you boys have said there. The problem that I have most of it. But the problem that I have got is you're saying that he wanted to stay and fight for his place, which is not 100% true. I think Maguire, the main reason why he stayed at Man United is because they weren't willing to pay off his contract and he was going to lose money financially for that. I think that was the biggest motivator. I think staying and fighting for his place,
fair enough.
I don't think that would have been anything to do with it if he would have got paid that money that he ought to have been paid. So I'm not quite sure I agree with you there. But you've mentioned Scotland there quickly, so I will move on to. I'll just sort of give you my thoughts on that, and then we can kind of have a more broad discussion. No, Henderson was obviously a great start, and like I said against the Ukraine game, compare that to the Scotland game, the difference on the pitch is completely stark. Playing between the lines, Henderson, his ability is control the ball and either pass it back or sideways. There's no ability to move through the lines quickly and break teams down quickly on that sort of counter-offensive move. And again, you've hit the nail on the head, both of you. Southgate before the game didn't want to play Foden at centre mid because he'd be out of position. Played Trippier at left back, where he's played once for his club, and Foden's played centre midfield 76 times for City. Also played Maddison on the left against Ukraine, which obviously we've discussed. Never played there before. So that, in a sense, makes Gareth Southgate not only useless, but a fucking liar. England, again, played between the lines really quickly with intent for the most part. And I thought Phillips played his part really well in the game, actually. To say that he doesn't play for Man City on a regular basis, eyebrows are obviously raised because it's the same problem with Maguire, that he doesn't play for his club. So why should he play for his country? But I thought Phillips really, really did well in the game. And I thought he played his part, and he sort of complemented Jude Bellingham in his position really well, I thought. Rice, pretty ineffectual again. It is what it is with him. I'm not his biggest fan, as we all know. Want him to do well, but just don't see it. And Foden and Rashford dropping into them central positions when needed, I thought was ideal. But obviously, the star of the show, Jude Bellingham. I mean, what a fucking special talent we've got on our hands there. It makes me very, very hopeful for the future of the England team beyond Gareth Southgate, because he is only 20 years of age, bless him. So, but yeah, first touch, taking the ball, he ran McGinn off the park. I mean, poor John McGinn. If you looked at him after that game, he looked absolutely shagged, bless him. Bless his little heart. I mean, he's one of the most hard-working players in the Premier League for Villa, and he got absolutely shagged by Bellingham, so fair play to him. I think, Dawson, you mentioned loads of space behind the Scotland defence, almost trying to play an offside trap, but that's a massive mistake when you're playing against Foden, Jude Bellingham, Rashford. With the pace they've got, I think that's a massive mistake. And again, you mentioned there, Sam, you're absolutely spot on. We're at the point now where putting Maguire in an England shirt, it's unfair on him. I feel sorry for him being put in these positions, I do. He's not good enough, full stop. The lack of match sharpness just adds on to the fact that he's not good enough. And you could see that. You could see that on the pitch. He's just not sharp. He doesn't understand where to stand. He doesn't understand when to go, when to stay. He ain't got a clue. And again, a poor substitution from Southgate. What a fucking shock. And the fact that he scored the own goal, that allowed the Hampden Park to get back into the game. And if John McGinn scores that header, what comes off his shoulder, that's 2-2. And Hampden Park, 50,000 Scots behind you playing against their biggest rivals. So that's just another example of where we've had to dig in and win against Southgate, against what our manager's telling us to do, because his mistake almost meant that Scotland were at 2-2 within 10, 15 minutes after the restart. Sam, you hit the nail on the head. I can't really add much to what you've said. Southgate coming out after the game saying it's a disgrace the way that fans treat Maguire. What is a fucking disgrace is that, Sam, you said it exactly that. I've put it down here, setting him up for failure every single time. Guehi and especially Dunk in that first half, they were absolutely unbelievable.
Fantastic.
Unbelievable. They were never out of place. Every single time. Scotland, I mean, they didn't have many attacks, but when they were on the attack, I would just sat there in my chair, chilled out as fuck, not a problem, because I knew we'd deal with it. And that's how we should be. Against teams like Scotland especially, that's how we should be. The bloke, again's gone from incompetence to threatening the success of the team by being an absolute blockhead who's had absolutely no self-awareness or just no clue whatsoever. It just fucking stuns me. I think the summary I take from this 2 games that they've played against Ukraine is that for a long time I've thought Southgate's not the man for the job. We all know that. And that he's holding the team back, and therefore they're going to have to win in spite of him, as I mentioned. But after these 2 games, I'm starting to rethink, and I'm genuinely thinking that he's a detriment to the team. And like I said before, if we turned up to our next game and we got no manager in the dugout and the team literally turned up, Kane took the team talk and said, right, let's get out there, boys, and let's play our stuff, I would be more confident about a result than if Gareth Southgate's in charge. Liar, coward, cunt.
Fuck it, that is scathing. I've got a question for you, Kempy, just before we wrap up this segment of England. Can we win the Euros with Gareth Southgate?
No.
Even in spite of him?
Not a fucking chance. Not a fucking chance. Before these 2 friendlies, I might have said, before the Scotland game actually, before the Ukraine game, sorry, I might have said, we've got a chance in spite of Southgate for winning it. But after the team that he fielded against Ukraine, after the lies that he's told in the media, the flat-out blatant lies, after the reaction to the Maguire situation, and after the uninspired substitutions against Scotland, I think he's too detrimental to the team for us to win the Euros.
Fair enough.
I will just chuck my 2 pence in. We know sometimes we like to put the devil's advocate argument out there, whether or not we agree with it, but purely for the sake of conversation. But from Southgate's point of view, I do agree with the points he made about Maguire, about what he's done for the England team. He's struggled at United pretty much since day one, since joining. He was fantastic at Leicester. His performances there and his style of play was what earned him that big money move. And he was brilliant at the World Cup in 2018. He was fantastic at the Euros, despite missing the first game. He made the team of the tournament. But I think now the position that we're in 2023, I completely agree with what you lads have said. He's not playing club football. It's not like we're struggling. It's not like we've not got any depth at centre-back, so we still need to play him. Again, in that position where at half-time he was brought on, Tomori and Colwell were sat on the bench. There's not really any reason to justify not bringing them on over Maguire and putting him in that situation. So for me, this is not on Maguire as much stick as he gets. He has been fantastic in an England shirt for many a year. But in this last sort of 12 months or so since the World Cup, those mistakes at club level have now started to creep in at international level as well, whereas before they weren't. And you could still justify Harry Maguire in an England shirt because of the performances that he was putting in. So, pretty much since the World Cup, I think in the friendlies that they've played, you've seen Maguire passing out of play when there's no need to, being out of position and players getting around him. Like you said, Kemp, earlier, that Ukraine game where he was marking his fellow centre-back for the goal. Scotland obviously scoring the own goal, which Aaron Ramsdale made the point after the game, like if any other player scores that, you think, tough luck, he stuck a foot out to clear it. But obviously Harry Maguire is in a tough position where that spotlight is so much on him where he's going to be pulled and picked apart for doing that. So, for me, the blame is fully on Southgate. But I do want to give Maguire credit for the performance that he had put in. But unfortunately, this year so far, those mistakes and that spotlight he's had on a club level is now starting to creep in on an international level. So I'm not saying he should retire from international football, but the onus has got to be on Southgate to say, we're not struggling for depth. The players that we've got sat on the bench, the players that we've got that aren't making the squad are absolutely fantastic. He's got no reason at this moment to be putting Maguire in that position.
It's unbelievable that Tomori didn't come on instead of Maguire in the Scotland game. It's absolutely unbelievable. I can kind of half get his logic that he doesn't want to do it in a competitive match, but that was an absolutely perfect game to drop Tomori in and just give him a few more minutes at international level. And the fact that he's just reverted to type again and just gone for Maguire at half time or whatever what time he come on, it's embarrassing. It was half time, it's ridiculous.
And I can't agree with you there more, Dawson. And I don't know if I said it in my summary of the games well enough, but I do not blame Harry Maguire for this situation. I don't. I think he's been put in a situation where he's not good enough and he's really, really struggling, bless him. And I do feel really sorry for him. He's a product of the Sheffield United Youth Academy. He grew up about 5 minutes from me. I like the lad and I really feel sorry for him. But if you played Aggie, and I love Aggie so much, but if you played Aggie at centre-half for England, I wouldn't blame Aggie. Do you know what I mean? He's not good enough, and I feel so sorry for him because he's been put in a position where it's an unwinnable situation for him, and it's all on Gareth Southgate.
Well, I'd say let's not get into it too much, but we have. But anyway, England, lads, I don't know if you know, they will return next month. 2 games at Wembley in the middle of October, pretty much literally a month. A month yesterday is their next game, a friendly against Australia at Wembley, and then England versus Italy in a Euros qualifier. So I'm no doubt there'll be plenty of discussion when the squad's released, when those starting lineups are released, especially that game against Italy at Wembley. The last time they played there was, of course, the Euros final a couple of years ago that we lost on penalties. So if players like Maguire are still in the squad and still starting, if players like Henderson are still in the squad, I'm sure we'll have plenty to say as the road to Euro 2024 heats up. So, lads, we'll sit on that for a month and we'll bring it back mid-October. Moving on to next weekend, this weekend, should I say. Looking up and down the fixtures, there are some good fixtures out there, but nothing that I would say is sort of blockbuster like an Arsenal United that we had before the international break. But one fixture that I did want to bring up, lads, and just sort of get your opinion on the two teams. They're teams that we've not really discussed too much so far this season. But the Saturday evening game live on TV is Newcastle at home to Brentford. In the 5:30 kickoff. Newcastle currently, after that opening day 5-1 win against Villa, have lost all 3 games since. They sit 14th on 3 points from 4 games. And Brentford have started this season relatively okay. They've got 2 wins out of 4. They're sitting in 8th place, just off those Euro spots, I know, very early in the season, and doing so without Ivan Toney after that 9-month ban. So I just want to sort of go around the room and get your thoughts. And Aggie, I'll start with you on this one. Newcastle, obviously, big hopes after last season going into the Champions League. My bold prediction was for them to finish outside the top 8, and I was worried after that first game, that 5-1 win against Villa. But since then, really struggled and lost every single game. Brentford, a lot of people thought they might struggle this season without Ivan Toney up until early next year, but seem to be doing okay. So Newcastle, Brentford, what are your thoughts on both those sides?
I think for Newcastle, where they are in the league at the moment, you've got to take into account some of the sides that they've faced. I'm just having a look now that they've already faced Liverpool, they've faced Man City, they got a dominant win over Aston Villa, then they lost to Brighton. So the 3 losses that they had to Liverpool, Man City and Brighton is one of them teams that I think they're about on par with, top half of the Premier League sort of battling. City and Liverpool, I'm not going to begrudge them too much of a defeat against those two sides.
Just before you continue, I will let you continue. But you can't defend them against Liverpool. They was playing against 10 men for a large part of that game. They should have won that game. So normally I'd agree with you on the Liverpool one. They were playing against 10 men for the majority of the game, so I can't really forgive them for that one.
I get what you're saying, and sometimes teams play better with 10 men than they do with 11. It's that old saying, isn't it? And I get what you're saying, and I didn't see all of the game, so I'll say fair enough on that one. But with Man City again, it's a defeat that you kind of expect. I think what's happening with Newcastle is the same sort of thing that happened with Burnley. So Burnley got there by some sort of freak of nature. They got into Europe. Newcastle obviously performed much better, had a much better squad than what Burnley had at the time, got into the Champions League. But over the summer, they haven't really added too much depth, and definitely quality and depth that they needed to be able to, put the Champions League on their shoulders as well as handling the Premier League. And I think that might be what we start to see over the next couple of months as well. Maybe them start to struggle a little bit more. As for Brentford, I said it at the beginning of the season, Brian Mbeumo will be a decent replacement for Ivan Toney, and I think he's coming to a class of his own. I think Brentford, I'm just going to check the table actually, to be fair, see exactly where they are at the moment. They're 8th place, so they're performing well themselves at the moment. Apart from that draw against Bournemouth, been quite convincing. Got a draw opening day against Tottenham, who we've seen have gone on and do decent things. I think the thing with Brentford is they're a side that maybe go under the radar a little bit, and a lot of people overlook because they don't think the players are, that great. But they've got certain pieces of quality in there that I think separates them from some sides. And it wouldn't surprise me this weekend, despite Newcastle being the home side, if Brentford walked out with all 3 points.
Do you think last season they potentially overachieved, Aggie? Because obviously it was pretty much almost the same squad, bar like Alexander Isak, that pushed them to where they finished. So you look at the likes of Almiron and just going through the team. Obviously, you had Dan Burn, Sven Botman. These are all players who were absolutely outstanding last season, but they were all still knocking about when they was in the dogfight at the bottom of the Premier League. Could it not? Because last season, is there any chance it could have been a bit of an anomaly where they just outperformed above and beyond their ability, and now we're seeing a bit of a regression on the season after, and they're playing at the level they should. I mean, you look at the signings they made, decent signings: Tonali, Harvey Barnes. Then they signed Lewis Hall from Chelsea, who's probably pretty much one. I think I don't know if he's on loan, so he's not really going to have too much of an impact, you'd thought. But signings that I think they probably could have gone a little bit more over the top with. What do you reckon? Could it be overachieving, or?
I I think it's more that when Eddie Howe came in, Newcastle were struggling, and he brought in his own style of football and helped them adapt to that, and that's where they started picking up the points, because we've already seen from what he did with Bournemouth before that Eddie Howe's got very good tactics about him. But I think what he's struggling with at the moment is people have sussed it out. People know how to play against his side now, and he's not really adapting to that. As well as that, he's not brought in too many players that have added quality and depth. Yeah, he's brought in, like you say, Tonali. He's brought in Lewis Hall, who, again, not going to see too much game time, and Harvey Barnes, who, of course, I don't think he played too much for Leicester actually last season, especially for the back end of it. So I think there's areas where you could look at it and think maybe Eddie Howe needs to adapt and change up his style of play a little bit. Maybe he should have invested a little bit more wisely. I think that's something that, of course, they're going to have to address in January. But with the squad depth they don't have, and I'm fearing that it's going to be a similar sort of situation to Burnley, I could see them, Skin said, they're not going to make top 8. I think with the way you look at how the squad's set up, the amount of players that they've got on the payroll, you're going to be looking at bottom half of the table or an early exit from the Champions League. And I think Newcastle fans will be upset with that. And like I've said, if it doesn't improve soon, I think that's where the patience begins to run out with Eddie Howe.
I'm just going to kind of half chuck your own question back at you, Sam, because between now and our next recording, the Champions League does return. It is back next Tuesday. Newcastle kick off their group stage away at AC Milan next Tuesday evening. So when we did the season predictions, like I said earlier, my bold prediction was Newcastle to drop out of the top 8 in the Premier League. That being because despite their money, despite their newfound riches, they haven't really gone out and splashed the cash. And I was worried about that strength in depth because I'm not expecting a big Champions League run, or I wasn't at the time, but those 6 games will have an effect and could potentially leave them chasing for the rest of the season. And then the Champions League draw came in, Milan, PSG, Dortmund, the group of death. So yeah, a really, really tough 6 games. So again, we're only 4 games into the season. The Champions League hasn't yet. They've got all the time in the world to turn it around and make signings potentially in January as well. But with the start that they've had, despite that tough run of fixtures that Aggie mentioned, 3 losses out of 4, the Champions League is just about to start. They're playing a team that are playing relatively well and probably full of confidence. And again, I'm kind of chucking your own question back at you, but what do you see for that Newcastle team for the rest of this season?
I think your prediction could be a very good one, to be honest. Looking at it now, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not fucking starting a fire and chucking Newcastle straight on it because it's 4 games for fuck's sake. So yeah, as Kemp said a few podcasts ago, everyone calm down a bit. But it's been a bad start. There's no getting away from that. Three losses out of 4 is definitely not where you want to be. I don't think they lost a lot of games last season at all, did they? So they're probably about halfway to the losses as they did last season. So yeah, it's not good. And like you say, with the mix of the Champions League football in there, as well as the Premier League, they're going to struggle. And I would have liked to have seen at least 3 or 4 more signings just to help with that depth, like you say, because I'm just looking at the squad now. They've got the likes of Javier Manquillo, who played for fucking Liverpool, and it was absolutely shocking. Matt Targett. Joe Willock's a decent player, don't get me wrong. But yeah, it's not a team for me that looks like a top 4 Premier League side and definitely not a Champions League side. So I think it was a matter of potentially overachieving last year. And I think we're kind of seeing that fall off this year for me.
Yeah, and especially teams like Chelsea and Liverpool that you would assume, I know Chelsea haven't had the best start, but you would assume over the season will improve. Teams like Tottenham as well under Ange have started fantastically well too. So yeah, could be a long season ahead. But as we go on, we will of course review that. But a potential good game on that Saturday evening, I'm sure. Newcastle Brentford could be a little sneaker for first game on Match of the Day Saturday evening. But that is football. Not a huge amount to talk about with the international break. But again, the Champions League is returning next week. So we will have plenty to talk about next week with the teams such as Arsenal and Manchester United returning to the Champions League for the first time in quite a while. Of course, Newcastle, as I mentioned, they're back for an even longer time as well. So episode 69 next week. We will have plenty to discuss and talk about with the Champions League return. But Kempy, Sean Strickland, it was a shocker. It was a shocker. But talk us through what happened in Sydney this past weekend. Yeah, we have a new champion in the UFC, mate. Talk us through it.
Jesus fucking Christ. Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland, for anybody who knows anything about MMA, Sean Strickland is the new UFC middleweight champion of the world, defeating Israel, the last stylebender, Adesanya, by unanimous decision this last weekend in the Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney, Australia. And my God, what a shock that was. Dawson, you just touched on it there. Nobody saw it coming. Not one person. I did not see or hear one person from the MMA world, the community, Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it. Not one person said Sean Strickland would defeat Israel Adesanya, but defeat him he did. Unanimous decision, 49-46, 49-46, 49-46. And there was no denying the new UFC middleweight champion of the world, Sean Strickland. And yeah, an incredible night of fights. A really exciting night. When we saw the card, it was a little bit of a sleeper, I thought, in my opinion. There were a lot of interesting and exciting fights on the card, but you just didn't quite know where they were going to go, which way, and whether they were going to be interesting or entertaining. But my God, they really were. We had 2 first-round finishes in the first 2 fights of the evening. Tyson Pedro knocking out Anton Turklaj with punches after 2 minutes and 12 seconds of the very first round. The Pleasure Man, I think, is the nickname for Anton. And unfortunately, he was pleasured to the shadow realm by Tyson Pedro after 2 minutes and 12 seconds of the very first round. We move then to the heavyweight division, where the hometown hero Justin Taffer defeated Austin Lane, the former NFL linebacker, I think he was, Austin Lane, after 1 minute and 22 seconds of the very first round to get him a win and hopefully move him up the heavyweight division. Manuel Carpe against Felipe dos Santos was next. Carpe was meant to be fighting against Kai Kara France, another flyweight, an Australian boy. Obviously, as you mentioned, it was from the Kudos Bank Arena in Sydney, Australia, and that would have been a very interesting fight. Kai Kara France, unfortunately, did have to pull out of the fight, so Felipe dos Santos stepped in at short notice and gave a really good account of himself. I think his most recent fight, or one of his most recent fights, was on the Dana White's Contender Series, which is something that people do to try to get into the UFC. But this young man took his opportunity most definitely and put up a real fight against Manuel Carpe, who unfortunately, for Felipe dos Santos, won by unanimous decision after 3 5-minute rounds. So it looks as though Manuel Carpe will be fighting Kai Kara France next in that flyweight division, and it continues to rebuild after the years under Demetrius Johnson's tyrannical reign as the flyweight champion, where he was going round it twice to beat everybody and completely kill that division off. Next, in the co-main event of the evening, another hometown boy, Tai Tuivasa, Bam Bam, for Alexander Volkov in the heavyweight division, as we've discussed. And this was a very, very interesting fight. Always interesting and entertaining when Tai Tuivasa fights, especially in his hometown. But unfortunately, it wasn't to be for Bam Bam Tuivasa today, or on the weekend, on Saturday rather, as he lost against Alexander Volkov by an Ezekiel choke. You don't quite often see Ezekiel chokes in the UFC, but we saw one in Sydney this weekend, and that moves him to 14-6 and 3 losses on the skid. Cyril Gane by KO, Sergey Pavlovich by KO, and then Alexander Volkov by submission, as I say, 4 minutes and 37 seconds of the second round. The main event. Nobody saw it coming. Nobody knew. Nobody wanted to know. It was going to be Israel Adesanya. This was the one that couldn't fail. This was one that never failed, as Gary Neville said, historically. And it did for Israel, the last stylebender Adesanya, who didn't look like he could get going throughout the entire fight. He started slow. It was a typical Izzy pattern of sort of hand fighting and trying to get the range and understanding Sean Strickland's patterns. And Israel Adesanya does something really effective in his fights, where for the first round or two, he downloads you. You saw it against Paulo Costa. He figured out his movement, and then he punished him in that second round and knocked him out. Against Alex Pereira in that most recent fight, figured out his movement and knocked him out. And unfortunately against Sean Strickland, he was unable to do that. Strickland landed a really big 1-2 in the very first round that put Israel Adesanya down, and he tried to finish it off. It was really, really close to the end of the first round, and there is an argument to say that if he wouldn't have been saved by the bell, he may have finished Israel Adesanya in that first round. After that, it was one-way traffic completely by Sean Strickland. I think everybody was expecting Israel Adesanya to get back into the fight, and he never did. In that second round, Adesanya, he did look as though he was coming back into the fight, did look as though he was trying to find his rhythm. I did mention there that the judges all did have Adesanya winning one round And that was the one round that I think everybody scored for Adesanya, the only round of the evening that everybody scored for Adesanya in the end. And apart from that, it was one-way traffic. Sean Strickland, he went with the high guard, as Sean Strickland quite often does, sort of blocking those head kicks coming in from Izzy. And Izzy didn't really throw much of anything else in significance. Sean Strickland kept it really, really simple. He came forward, he pressured, he threw 1-2s, he landed them more often than not. And Israel Adesanya came back with absolutely nothing. Nobody saw it come in. It's quite obvious that there was obviously something wrong with Israel Adesanya on the night. I'm not sure he's the type of fighter or the type of former champion that will come out and say that something was wrong, but it's quite obvious to everybody that it was. Israel Adesanya, he's had a couple of defeats now, three defeats in his last few fights. One against, obviously, Jan Blachowicz, one against Sean Strickland now, and the former one against Alex Pereira before he got that win back. And unfortunately, made a bit of an ass of this one by losing against Sean Strickland by unanimous decision. But again, you got to tip the cap. You got to take it off to Sean Strickland, the most controversial man in the UFC, perhaps. He speaks his mind. He's been through a really, really tough time in his life, a really, really tough upbringing. He got involved with the wrong crowd when he was a kid, got kicked out of school, was involved in some really, really difficult and bad circles when he was a child. But now look at him. He's the UFC middleweight champion of the world. Age 32. He's got a few years left in him at the top level. And fingers crossed for Sean Strickland. He can do it again and again and again. What's next for both? Who knows? There have been conversations of Israel Adesanya having an immediate rematch. I'm not quite sure whether that will happen or not. I don't think Israel Adesanya in his feedback afterwards looked like he'd got, quite honestly, the balls to do that again after the response and after the performance against Sean Strickland. But who knows? Israel Adesanya is a ballsy guy, just like our good man Skin. And I'm sure he will come back and hopefully reclaim that UFC middleweight championship of the world. Or he may sail off into the sunset. Who knows in the UFC? But that middleweight division, I'm sure there'll be another contender coming off the production line. Maybe Dricus du Plessis, who was hopefully going to be initially fighting Israel Adesanya for the belt. Maybe he's next in line. Who are we to say? But what a great night. What a great weekend. UFC 293, it delivered. And something else that was delivered yesterday officially, the UFC and WWE have merged to create TKO Group Holdings with Ari Emanuel as the CEO, Vince McMahon on the board of directors above the UFC. Really, really weird. If he listened to Shane McMahon in 2000, he'd have bought the company beforehand anyway, and he wouldn't have had to do it now. But hey-ho, you can't do that in retrospect. So a big, big week for the UFC. They've gone live on the New York Stock Exchange as TKO Holdings, and Sean Strickland is the new UFC middleweight champion of the world. What a week for the MMA leader. We then move to this weekend, and it doesn't get any better or slower in the UFC. We return, I believe, to Las Vegas, Nevada, and we do the T-Mobile Arena. Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko, the rematch for the UFC Women's Flyweight Championship of the World. One of the biggest upsets in UFC history when Alexa Grasso defeated Valentina Shevchenko for that Women's Flyweight title not so long ago now, and ended the dominance of Valentina Shevchenko, 35-year-old, hadn't lost in a long, long time before that. And the only time she had lost was Amanda Nunes, and you can't exactly blame her for losing to the MMA GOAT in the women's division. But she had various consecutive title defenses. I think it was 8 consecutive UFC flyweight championship defenses. She was the only UFC women's flyweight champion in the history of the belt, in the history of the sport at this point in time. But again, Alexa Grasso did defeat her by a submission, by a face crank, I think they went down to 4 minutes and 34 seconds of their fight in Las Vegas, Nevada at UFC 285 in March. So that's going to be a rematch. We're really looking forward to seeing how Valentina Shevchenko responds to that at 35. Can she respond in the way that she wants? And can Alexa Grasso continue to be the UFC Women's Flyweight Champion of the World with her own custom belt? Absolutely made up for Alexa Grasso. The UFC don't do things like that. It's not WWE, although they have merged with WWE now as TKO Group Holdings, as I mentioned. She's got her own custom belt. She's the Women's Flyweight Champion of the World. She's representing Mexico this weekend, and I'm sure she's going to do what she can. Some other fights on the card there as well. Kevin Holland against Jack Della Maddalena in the welterweight division. and I'm sure that is going to be a good one. Kevin Holland, Big Mouth, as Dana White calls him, I'm sure he will put on a show. Other decent fights in the on the card as well, but I'm sure the headliner, the one that we're all looking at, is going to be Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko. Dawson.
Just a quick question there. You were talking about the merger there this week, obviously confirmed a couple of months ago, but has officially gone through and happened within the last couple of days. Do you foresee any potential changes to the product that is UFC? I know there's been sort of rumours about how they, as a new business, I suppose, will lay out weekends with WWE and UFC potentially putting events on at the same time over the weekend, or events on in the same weekend as a combined thing. But do you foresee potentially any changes to how the UFC is presented, whether that's weight classes, events, or anything like that? Or do you think it should be business as usual and it is more of a top line measure that you won't really see affect the on-screen product?
No, you won't. The only difference you'll see is probably when the ESPN deal comes up. Ari Emanuel will probably get a fuck ton of money for the UFC. And you'll see Ari Emanuel probably trying to use WWE and UFC as leverage to kind of get himself bigger deals on network, perhaps. So it wouldn't surprise me in a couple of years if you saw the UFC and WWE both on Amazon Prime or Disney Plus, for example, or something like that. I think that's the main thing that we're going to see as customers when we're watching the product. But apart from that, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The UFC is the world leader in MMA. They've got the biggest stars. They've got the biggest gates, the biggest revenues. Why would you change it? So in terms of on-screen product, Dawson, as you mentioned there, I don't think anything will change from the UFC side of things. But it's only going to make them stronger. And Vince McMahon is the chairman of TKO Group Holdings, which the UFC is part of. How fucking crazy is that? But there you go.
I'm sure you didn't have that on your bingo card when we started 2023, did you?
I didn't. I must admit I didn't. But there you go.
That's it. Well, we'll be back next week for episode 69 and the latest edition of Kempy's Combat Corner. And I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about with the UFC Fight Night this upcoming weekend. On to Formula One now. And Aggie, I'm going to bring you in for this one, mate. Your favourite race of the calendar of the season. I'm so sorry. Of the season. It is Singapore, mate. Talk us through what you predict for this upcoming weekend.
I can't. I'm done. Now, so yeah, this weekend Formula One comes back after a week's break, and of course Red Bull on the back of 14 race wins out of 14 so far this season. I think a couple of more races, and it's pretty much game, set, and matches in it for Red Bull this season. Max Verstappen, of course, leading the Drivers' Championship, but we get to go to Singapore, and we've already mentioned that whilst he is leading the Drivers' Championship, that has, of course, all come from race finishes, not from the sprint race or from qualifying necessarily. It does mean that with the street race, it being a short circuit, no width, that we're going to be where you start is usually where you finish, unless there's some very good strategies taking place. I can't even focus on Sam whilst I'm trying to. The unprofessionalism is unreal. So I'll look towards the stats and the information that I've got heading in towards the Singapore Grand Prix, because there have been a couple of changes that have taken place in preparation for this race. Of course, a couple of corners that have been taken out. We do still have the 3 DRS zones that I'm going to ask Skin about in just a moment's time with the Singapore Grand Prix. It's not one you like racing on, but for me, it's the night race. It's the atmosphere that really makes this race what it is. And for me, those changes that have taken place, I don't really see it changing who's going to win the race. In my mind, it stays as Max Verstappen. But because of the track being very narrow, it does mean that the strategy plays, of course, a huge part. We saw a couple of weeks ago, Ferrari, the changes that they made over the summer break has really helped their car elevate towards that sort of championship battling side. But it's probably a bit too late in the season for them to be able to do that. And of course, the speed and pace of Max Verstappen in a race environment is just too much for them. Where there's not much space for overtaking, it all lies on qualifying. A very good qualifying session could see the end of Max Verstappen's reign of dominance this season. But he's currently got the record for the most race wins consecutively, just taking that from Sebastian Vettel. So anything he does now will be setting a new record. So, Skin?
Yes, mate, absolutely. And you're right there. In terms of an occasion, an event, and a visual thing, Singapore is, of course, right up there. But my concern is the street race. Monaco this last season has declined in terms of, I think, the least amount of overtakes that there's ever been. So one question that I wanted to pose to you is something that a good friend of the show, Nath, said to me I say a few months ago, a couple of months back during sort of towards the end of the calendar before the summer break, and he mentioned a potential change that could come in to street race weekends, basically. Aggie, we know the FIA have made big strides to try and make the whole field more competitive, but with street racing, it's very hard. And I think I can't remember what race it was, but we spoke about sort of limited overtaking opportunities. Do you think that they could potentially change? They've brought in sprint racing and things like that to try and sort of add excitement to a weekend. When it comes to street race weekends, is there more they could do? Could they potentially bring a time trial layout for the weekend instead of the race to give fans not only a turning up for the weekend but also watching on the TV? You know, are there ways that they could change things up to make it an exciting product to watch?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing for me that really rings that we could do is the championship is back to front for qualifying. So instead of actually doing the qualifying session where the faster cars predominantly make it through to the third qualifying session and you see obviously the runaway leaders, put it all down to strategy, because of course the engineers have worked relentlessly to make sure these cars are as good as they are. Obviously Red Bull at the moment are the favourites and further ahead than everybody else in terms of development. But if they look at the championship and each week or each race go based upon the championship and move it back to front. So, of course, Max Verstappen, who's leading the championship, would start from the back of the grid. It might make it a much more competitive environment. And you get to see drivers like Verstappen, Hamilton, Russell, you know, those that are usually the front runners, work their way up as opposed to just being out there in the front because they have got the fastest car. And then a lot of it will come down to, you know, the strategies, how much they can focus on getting the overtakes of some of these other cars. Because despite being in slower cars, there are some drivers on track that are very good at defending their position. The experience of Alonso we've seen before. Daniel Ricciardo is very good at that. We've seen in the past the likes of Massa, Barrichello, Button, people like that are very good at defending. So you'll see a very different approach to the race. So that's something I'd like to see brought in, going back to front for the race from what the championship looks like.
That's fair, mate. And look, qualifying, as we mentioned last time out, is starting to become a bit more competitive despite what's happening on race day. So with it being a street race, with the opportunities to overtake being limited, obviously qualifying is probably more important than it is on a usual racetrack. So can you see many differences between the result in qualifying and the result at the end of the race? And who have you got standing on the podium come Sunday evening?
I think naturally it's difficult to bet against Verstappen, but I think it's going to be a Ferrari race and we might actually see the upset of Red Bull, not completing the perfect season. So I'm going to go with Leclerc on top step of the podium, Max in second, and I'm going to go for Lewis in third. And for the first time in a long time, it'll be three drivers from three different teams.
I like it. Sam, I suppose we've got to start asking you the question when it comes to F1, where are you putting Lando on the grid? As you've somehow travelled to the beach between football and F1, mate.
Don't know what's going on from our background here. What do you want to comment on Lando?
Yes, mate. Where's Lando finishing this weekend in Singapore?
There we go. Not a podium finish. I think he's going to fall off a bit now, and I'm going to have him to finish 8th.
That's fair. I know we'll get into weekend conversations, but can you see yourself seeing a bit of the night race in Singapore this weekend?
Night race?
It's a night race. It's day over here, but it's night over there to make sure it's still on a normal time over here.
What time over here?
About 2-3 o'clock, yeah.
I doubt it, because I've got red zone from 6. I'll probably do something that she wants to do between then and then. So, yeah, my time will be very limited on a Sunday from now until February, I'm afraid.
That's it then. But Aggie, we'll review Singapore next week, mate. See if you could get your predictions right. Completely agree. For what reason have you got to go against Max at the moment? Really not sure who steps up on the podium. I think it could be a bit of a free-for-all this weekend. But if I had to put my name to someone, we'll go Max wins, Lewis second, and I'm going to go George third. I'm going to go for a really positive weekend for Mercedes with that.
The race actually starts at 1 o'clock on Sunday, so a bit earlier than what we thought.
There we go. That's fair enough, as you would say. But that's F1. NFL, we've been waiting for this for a long while. it is time to discuss actual NFL, National Football League, that's taking place on the pitch or on the field or on artificial turf, which is very convenient to discuss the first subject. And Sam, I'm going to come to you for this one. I know you're really eager to add Green Bay's performance against the Bears, but Aaron Rodgers, of course, left during the off-season, joined the New York Jets. There's a lot of fanfare. There was a lot of expectation about what he could potentially deliver. Kemp, stop, please. We need to start recording where everyone can see everyone, because then people will start behaving. But we know it's not going to happen. But anyway, Sam, Aaron Rodgers came to New York, a lot of fanfare, a lot of expectation, and in his fourth play as a New York Jets, snapped his Achilles and is out for the season. Talk us through it.
It's not much to say, is it? 4 plays in, they've done a trade with Green Bay. Green Bay need him to play about 65% of his snaps to get a first-round pick. Otherwise, it would be a second. That's how much they didn't really trust him. His mind going into the season, whether he'd make the full season, and he's actually had that decision taken away from him, and he's really nastily done his Achilles, which didn't look good, to be fair to him. Pretty gut-wrenching if you're a Jets fan, I must admit. It's one of them things that they've kind of all the headlines have been in New York in the off season, especially with the Hard Knocks. I've watched most of the Hard Knocks myself. I know Kemp has too, and he just looks like a different man. He looks like he's enjoying life again. And then 4 plays into the season, someone don't like him upstairs because it's a rotten thing to have to happen to you. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough pill to swallow if you're a football fan. Obviously, he left Green Bay, but he's served us and the Packers so good over these last 15 or so years. So, I wished him the best. I was hoping he'd have a good season this year, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that out of him. So, yeah, Aggie, what's your thoughts, mate, on the whole situation?
I've got a question for you, because obviously as a Green Bay fan, you've seen a lot of Aaron Rodgers. What's your thoughts on the potential of a retirement coming off the back of this injury?
Apparently not. I was on the assumption that could be well in his mind, but apparently one of the first things that went into his mind was one of the first things that come to him was the question of retirement, and he just turned around and said, absolutely not. He says, I've still got the fire. He says, I'm determined to come back as fit, as strong as I ever have been. And so apparently he has squashed them quite soon, and nipped him in the bud, should I say. Sorry, Dawson's now acting up, so I'm just struggling to get my words out as well. But there we go. Yeah, it's that time of week again, and it's Thursday. I think everyone's gotten a little bit giddy. No one can quite behave themselves except for Aggie, and to be fair, Kemp's just sat there.
Wednesday recording because we behaved then. Yeah,
we're all a little bit too tired to act twat, weren't we? But no. Back to Rodgers. It is shit, to be fair. 4 plays in, you didn't get a chance to see what he can do. We know what he can do from Green Bay, and there we go. So it looks like after all that palaver, it looks like Wilson is going to be under centre for the remainder of the season. And let's hope that the training camp with Rodgers has rubbed off on him a little bit. So there we go.
Completely agree with your point there, Sam. Obviously, I know you kind of from the heart are closest to that, with it being Rodgers, and like you said as well, the implications that has on Green Bay's draft preparation as well. With New York Jets being in the Patriots division, it does, I suppose, give Patriots more of a chance to potentially get, say, a wildcard spot in the AFC. But yeah, I completely agree with your point there. It's a shame. You wanted to see it. As a fan, you want to see those matchups. I think Jets, not including the game against the Bills, have got 4 more games that are currently due to be sort of a standalone televised game. They could potentially be moved now, but they were there in the first place because, they were highlight games. This coming Sunday, for example, in week 2, they were playing the Cowboys. Sam, as a Green Bay Packers fan, the battles that Rodgers has had with Dallas Cowboys over the years, especially in the playoffs, that would have been a great matchup, especially with Cowboys' defensive performance this Sunday, which we'll get into shortly. So, yeah, taken away the potential positives for your own team, it is such a shame as an NFL fan. You want to see that. You want to see the journey. 4 plays in, after everything that's happened this offseason, all the talk, all the chat, all the predictions, all the hope, for it to have gone that early is a real shame. But what can you do? There's nothing you can do now. And yeah, it's definitely on Zach Wilson now. Surely you would have benefited from spending a summer with Aaron Rodgers. And apparently from sort of conversations he had after the game, it looks like Aaron Rodgers is more than happy to really, really push and support and motivate Wilson through this season, which is only going to benefit him. So we will see. But Sam, I will very quickly come back to you. And to be fair, there are a couple of things that I'm going to come back to you on this, because there are a few things that you wanted to discuss. But Jordan Love at the wheel, Aaron Rodgers has moved on. Green Bay Packers are 1-0, and you and Tina in the group chat had a bit of a back and forth conversation on why Green Bay Packers are 1-0. But I think you want to put on record that you're going to be giving Jordan Love some flowers this week.
Absolutely. I mean, no one really knew what we had in Jordan Love. He's not really had much chance to prove himself. I think he's made one start before now, and I think he was in Kansas City. So, yeah, obviously, tough game to play. I think that was last season some point, or might have been the season before. So it wasn't really ready. Come in, through a touchdown or two. But, yeah, this was his first proper start in Green Bay, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I thought the composure he showed in the pocket was outstanding. One of the things, I know he's not quite a rookie, but one of the things young quarterbacks tend to do, especially athletic quarterbacks like him, is tend to look to run off and scramble early on. That wasn't the case. He was going through his first, second, third read, and then by the time, it were always seeming to be making that right decision, which I seen Colin Cowherd say something in the week about Jordan Love's performance. Said he didn't look like a superstar out there. He just looked like a guy that has got an offensive head coach, and that's how much a young quarterback will benefit from having an offensive coach. You always see, sometimes you get a young quarterback in and there's a defensive coach in there and it never quite works. If he's just sticking to LaFleur's scheme, and if this is what LaFleur's scheme is supposed to look like, but we've not really seen for the last couple of years because of Rodgers calling audibles at the line of scrimmage, then, bring it on, because we looked really explosive in the offensive game, and we're only going to improve because we've not even got Christian Watson back. It was a dominant performance from start to finish. We did only score 10 going into the off, but we were in complete control. Early turnover on downs for the Bears. We went and capitalised. First drive, Jordan Love started at about midfield, 40-odd yard drive, and went and pinged it in the end zone for. It might have been Dobbs for the first touchdown. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it was potentially. And we just didn't look back. Defensively, we looked excellent. Nice little pick six in there from Quay Walker. But the Bears were fucking awful. The Bears were so bad. And I get this is what Tina's issue was. He was saying, like, he was not willing to give Love any credit whatsoever because of how bad his franchise is at the minute. And I think that's harsh. I think you've still got to make them throws, and you've still got to be present and correct and do your things right. And he did that. He did everything that we could have asked him to do in that game. He could have easily turned the ball over, fumbled it, threw some picks, and he didn't do that. So, and again, I get what Tina's saying. He had all day to throw it. They got no pressure on us. Our offensive line was excellent that game as well. But yeah, the Bears look in trouble. I mean, I have infamously backed them to do quite well this year, and I think I've looked like an absolute tit already after week one. I think Fields looked very, very average. Didn't look like he could elevate anyone around him. You've got Chase Claypool out there who was getting absolutely dogged by the media at the minute for just putting zero effort in on his route running, his blocking for his runners. It's just not a good look for the Bears. They took last season to nosedive essentially, and you're thinking this needs to be the season really that they're going to bounce back. Head coaches don't get 3 years in the NFL these days to be 3 years being bad. They have to see some improvement, and if they're going to be the worst team in football again, because let's not beat about the bush, they was the worst team in football last year, and it was only because of the trade that they wasn't on the number one pick. And by the way, they traded that number one pick for DJ Moore, and I think they threw him the ball 3 times. So what are they doing with that? So yeah, I think the Bears are in trouble. If I could change my pick now on the NFC North predictions, I 100% would. I'm going to put that on record. Probably the earliest chair move we've ever had on Load of Sport after week one. But that's
I'm laughing because I'm thinking, thank fuck for that.
I'm going to take some serious heat away from you here, because that's how much confidence after watching that performance the Bears I have in them. I've got no confidence, and all the world could end up with the number one pick again if they don't see so many improvements, because from top to bottom, coaching plays, play calling, discipline, flags, penalties, holding on offensive line, no blocking. They look really bad, really, really bad. So, yeah, poor week one for the Bears, great week one for the Packers. And we've got the Falcons coming up this weekend, and I think that'll be a hell of a lot more of a test going into the Dome in Atlanta.
Absolutely, mate. And Sam, I'm going to, I know this is something you have been very, very, very clear that you don't want, but I'm going to hand over hosting duties to you for this next question as we talk about the Seahawks' loss to the Rams. So Aggie's going to talk us through this one, mate, but I'm going to allow you to open up the question and open up the floor to him to discuss that week one loss for the Seahawks.
Yeah, I appreciate that, mate. Appreciate that. So, Aggie, when... Was it last weekend we was coming round? Yeah, of course it was last weekend. I'm just trying to flick around to get the game up in front of me now, so I have the stats in front of me. But when we was discussing the season preview and week one going in, obviously you was quite confident on your Hawks. They're looking good. They've drafted a hell of a draft, probably one of the best drafts in the league. To a man. Then you said something that's just, is always going to come back and bite you in these situations. And you said, I think almost quoting word for word, is we're playing the LA Rams. It's a nice, easy game to start us into the season. It's a game we should be winning. So yeah, it's a nice way to start the season. Now the game has been played. I'd love to hear your thoughts about that, buddy. Take the floor is yours.
Well, on paper, it should have been an easy win, Stafford was poor towards when he played last season and then obviously went down injured. Cooper Kupp, so the main targets out of play as well. They'd lost Ramsey, they'd lost Wagner, they'd lost some important pieces on defense. So on paper, yeah, that should have been a nice and easy win for Seahawks. But as we know, in sports, games aren't won on paper, and the performance that we turned out just wasn't even close to being good enough. The Rams seemed riled and rallied together and ready to, take the game to us, and that's exactly what they did. I think Stafford found a new target that I can't pronounce the name of, but I think was a good little replacement for Kupp. I think
Tutu Atwell.
No, it wasn't Tutu Atwell. It was. I'll try and find the name for you right now on the receiving side of things. Nakua, that's it. Nakua, who got 10 receptions for 119 yards. Didn't reach the end zone. The end zone was all done by Kwan Williams, who, again, didn't get the lion's share of the running plays. But it just goes to show that, like you've said before, and we've all said before, that the games are won in the trenches. And we have a very poor O-line and a very poor D-line.
Just having a look at the stats now in the game. Obviously, I've seen pretty much nothing of this game. Was it the what time was the kickoff? Was it
9:25?
Yeah, that'd be why I didn't see it then. On the same time as Packers Bears. Just looking now, Cam Akers 22 attempts for 29 yards. That's one of the worst yards per attempt I think I've ever seen in a running back, 1.3. But your boys here, what was the defining feature of the loss? Because I'm just looking at the stats now. Geno Smith 16 of 26, 112 yards is pretty paltry. Kenneth Walker 12 attempts for 64 is a bit meh. I mean, I've got him in fantasy, so I knew damn well he'd not had a good game. Receiving though, no receiver had got above 47 yards, which was DK Metcalf on 3 attempts. It just seems like you wasn't able to pass the ball. What was happening? Was it the pass rush? Was your O-line not being able to stand up? What was the issue?
Aaron fucking Donald. He turned up like a man possessed and he was just breaking through almost everything. And I think there's a clip going around of when Geno Smith looked up to try and find a pass and so Aaron Donald went at him and he just got rid of the ball. We couldn't seem to find any space. I mean, Tyler Lockett only had 2 receptions. He went down injured and went into the injury tent being assessed for concussion. DK Metcalf. Now, I know this sounds stupid because only 3-4 years ago he was drafted, but he's one of the more senior members on this roster now.
Yeah.
He lost his head to the point that he's pushing folk around just after the play's gone down. And you're thinking, we're on a 2nd and 3 situation there. He pushes him. We're back to 2nd and 17 just for unsportsmanlike conduct. And you're thinking, he's one of your senior members. You need to keep your head focused on the game, not lose it in them sort of scenarios. And, 2nd and 17, we got an incomplete. 3rd and 17, it's just not manageable. Geno didn't look like the Geno that we saw last year. Hopefully that is just a little blip. But the Rams, like I say, they were just a completely different side to what I expected. I hold my hands up. Of course, I was wrong about them. I don't think they'll do quite as well against San Fran. I think they're a completely different defense to what we'd got. We were missing half of our secondary. We know Jamal Adams, Devin Witherspoon was out as well. So, we were missing them sort of players. So I think the main issue we had was we just didn't have time. Gino did not have time to be able to pass the ball out, and Walker just wasn't as effective as he was towards the back end of last season. But it's one game, we go again. The worry I've got is up next, we've got the Lions, who have just, of course, come off the back of a win at Arrowhead, haven't they? So they've got a nice little bit of confidence behind them, and, we've got to go to their place now and get something.
And could do you beating them for Packers, to be fair.
Well, I could do with us beating them for the Seahawks too.
Before I get into sort of the main question that I've got for the NFL segment, I know we don't try and talk about our own teams too much, but I think in this circumstance it needs acknowledging. Kemp, you mentioned in episode 67 that you'd booked Monday off. Your plan was to stop up Sunday night to watch Giants versus Cowboys. First of all, explain to our listeners how you escaped like a good motherfucker with that one. And also then tell us about the 40-0 loss to the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, well, it don't get much worse than that, does it? The only way is up, I think we can say about that one for our season. But yeah, I managed to avoid it by being fucking knackered. Lastminute.com, watched the UFC on Saturday night, which obviously started at 3 a.m. So went to sleep, had a decent nap on Sunday afternoon as well. But I got to Red Zone. I was watching the 9:25 games, I think I was watching Bears Packers actually at one point as well. And then it got to the point where I just turned to my better half. I turned to our Bland and said, listen, fuck this. I know I've got day off tomorrow, but I'm knackered. We're going to bed. So I did put the coverage on while we were in bed. But fell asleep like before the game even aired, to be honest with you. But yeah, I woke up in the middle of the night. I think it was 30-0 or 33-0, and I sort of opened my eyes, and then I just sort of a little wry smile come across my face, just like I didn't stay up for this, and I'm so fucking glad I didn't. But yeah, I've obviously since watched the highlights and looked at the stats. I think the scoreline, and by all means, it was horrendous. It was horrendous, and it was the worst possible start for the Giants we could have possibly had. I think the scoreline does flatter the Dallas Cowboys a little bit. DJ, good awareness and used the blitz to his advantage early on in the game, wheeling out of the pocket for a couple of decent first downs. Saquon Barkley picking up a decent 9-yard run as well on our first drive. We were 3rd and 7 on the 13-yard line. Let's just let that sink in. We were 3rd and 7 on the 13-yard line, and we got no points. And this was after our first drive, right? But an errant snap takes us back to the 33-yard line. A long field goal from 45 yards for Gano, which the Cowboys special team blocked and returned for the first touchdown of the game. They missed the point after touchdown, which was interesting, but nonetheless, it all slid very quickly downhill from there. And it was the same old story with the Giants, the story that I thought we'd got over after the last few drafts with Evan Neal and Andrew Thomas, and it was all the offensive line. I knew Micah Parsons and the Cowboys defense was going to be a fucking pain for us, but the O-line was completely non-existent. And you can't get away with it against Cowboys D-line. Can't get away with it all. 6 sacks for the Cowboys says it all. 15 completed passes from 28 attempts and 13 attempted runs from DJ. It wasn't running with purpose. He was running for his life, essentially, DJ, in this game, and I felt really sorry for him. Barkley, good grab, and for the Cowboys' second touchdown. But the Cowboys managed to pop it out of his hands for a return and a touchdown. So what can you do? PI calls all over the shop. Dak wasn't really special, but was picking up first downs and Dink and Dak, and that's exactly what it was. John Michael Schmitz at centre really needs looking at for me in terms of the Giants. Put us in danger for a fair few snaps, and like I say, the blocking was completely non-existent from the entire offensive line. And then the game just got away from us. Concentration completely went out the window. Chasing the game, you know how it is. We weren't at our best. And we're at our best, the Giants, in my opinion, when that O-line is functioning. Gives Saquon lanes to run into. Gives DJ the opportunity to either throw a quick run to the first down yard marker for a check down, or get sort of wheel out for options for potentially a run where DJ can pick up first downs. And none of that happened, unfortunately. So 40-0, can't start worse than that, really. But, not panicking just yet. But a real concerning start, and we need to bounce back with a win at the weekend, because if not, it's going to start getting pretty toxic at MetLife. But we'll see.
Well, to be fair to you, mate, if you could choose a week 2 matchup after that, you'd probably pick the Cardinals based on their current squads, and that's who you've got. So the hope is there. So that is sort of a bit about our own teams and a couple of bits that we wanted to talk about. But I think for me, the biggest headline in terms of moving forward and what this season could look like, and Sam, I'm going to come to you to this one to simply pose you the question. Basically, mate, for me, the biggest thing out of this week 1 is, are the Lions legit?
Well, they certainly went about the business in the right way, going into Arrowhead, the Super Bowl defending champions, opening night, presented with the banner, the Super Bowl banner, as they always do, and then went and stuffed them 21-20. And I would like to say that a certain somebody did have the Lions by 1, so I will claim that one for a load of sport first. And yeah, just looking at the stats now, Mahomes never really got going. I mean, 21 of 39, 266 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So pretty average night by his stretch. Jared Goff, 22 of 35, 253 yards and a touchdown. So again, pretty efficient from Jared Goff. But I think the main issue in the entire game was the Chiefs' wide receivers. They just couldn't seem to really get going. It was obviously without Travis Kelce, his number 1 target man, Valdez Scantling continuing his issues, what he's always had from obviously previous experience with Green Bay. Just not the safest pair of hands, cracking deep threat. But Kadarius Toney looked all for the world the reason why the Giants were happy to let him go. So. Yeah, it was a really poor night for the Chiefs on opening night. I think they will improve. I don't think there's too much to worry about. I think getting Kelce back is going to help that offense a lot. But on the flip side, it is a little bit concerning that it just takes one of your guys to go down and it's derailing the entire offense. So, yeah, what a win for the Lions. You've obviously backed them quite heavily to do well in your predictions. So, yeah, for first start, probably you pencil that game as one of their hardest games of the season going into it, and they've already ticked it off. So, yeah, cracking start for the Lions, and I hope it doesn't continue.
I'm sure you know. And Aggie, I'll come to you for this one, mate. You, obviously being a Seahawks fan, you predicted them to go quite well. Lions now potentially, look, there's probably not a bigger statement win than going to Kansas City and getting a win, especially their first game since becoming the Super Bowl champions. Do you see the Lions as a threat in the NFC now? And you know, it probably isn't the biggest sort of, I don't know what the right word is, but in terms of depth across the NFC division or conference, should I say, it's probably the lowest it's been for many a year. So do you see them now being able to potentially take on the heavyweights that are the Eagles, that are the San Francisco 49ers in that conference? Or is it just it's 1 week, it's one win? As Kemp would say, let's calm down and reassess maybe in a few weeks.
Yeah, I think 1 week, 1 win. We'll see what they do now moving forward. I think, like you've just said, for the NFC, it's literally the Eagles or the Niners, isn't it? Let's be fair, they're the 2 standout teams. It's not like with the AFC where you've got 3 or 4 teams that could really be quite competitive. So at no point did I say the Lions weren't going to be competitive or anything like that. I think they are a very good side. I did have them pegged down as one of the sides that we'd be able to beat when I gave you the 12-5 record that I thought we were going to finish on, but I also had the Rams down as that. I think the Lions shown a lot of grit and determination against a very difficult Chiefs side, because whilst they didn't have Travis Kelce, they still have Patrick Mahomes. And we all sat here and said that Mahomes is going to have that magic about him where he's going to be able to go up against the Lions. And with that experience that he's gained so far in the NFL, still walk out with the win and send the Chiefs to 1-0. So great to the Lions. I think it was very gutsy for them to go. I think it was the first drive, wasn't it? They were on 4th and 1 in their own half and they decided to go for it. So very gutsy, some very big decisions made from them. And obviously it paid off, but a win's a win. You know, like you've already said, probably the toughest matchup they're going to have all season. And they've managed to get the win out of it. So a lot of work for the Vikings to do if they're going to turn things around and win that division, like I've said, or for Green Bay. I think Green Bay had a very good opening weekend as well. And I'm just trying to think of who the last team is in there.
The Bears,
Vikings, the Bears, yeah. Well, let's say no more about the Bears.
That's how unforgettable they are. There you go. There you go. Yeah, that's it. Well, moving on to week 2, lads. Well, I know, again, we'll not sort of go in every week talking about our own teams. We try to avoid that in football. It's only right that we do that in the NFL as well. There are actually 2 Monday night football games this upcoming weekend, Aggie. If you fancy a very tired Tuesday. Unfortunately, though, probably not the most exciting matchups on paper. Saints versus Panthers and Browns versus Steelers. So, not the most exciting. So what I will do, lads, tonight, peek behind the curtain, I say tonight, Thursday night recording, we've got Vikings at Eagles, and then Sunday night football, probably a potential for a very good game, Dolphins at Patriots. So I'm going to ask and go around the room for your predictions for those. So Kemp, I'll start with you, please. Give us your predicted winner and by what score for the Vikings at Eagles in the Thursday night football game, and then the Sunday night football game, Dolphins at Patriots, which I will assume you won't have as big a gap as the one between the Cowboys and Giants this past Sunday.
No, the gaps don't get much bigger than that, let's be honest with you. So Vikings, Eagles, I'm going to go with Eagles by 10. And Dolphins against Patriots, very, very nice. I'm going to go with Dolphins by 7.
Interesting. Sam, take us through your predictions for Thursday night football and Sunday night football.
Well, as you know, I do not rate the Vikings, and I haven't rated the Vikings for probably 12 months. So I am definitely backing the Eagles in this one. If Vikings win this, I'll be very surprised. I am going to go for the Eagles. I like Kemp's by 10, to be fair, but for the sake of being different, Eagles by 13. And then for the Patriots Dolphins, I am going to go for the Dolphins. And I think they will beat the Patriots by, beat the Patriots by 5.
5 is interesting. It's not very often. I'll go in next. Vikings at Eagles. I do expect a comfortable Eagles win. Kirk Cousins with the Vikings. You put them Sunday 6:00. Absolutely phenomenal win record. You put them any other time slot and not so much. So I'm going to go with the Eagles by 17. On the Thursday night football fixture. Dolphins at Patriots. Patriots played very well against the Eagles. Overall started slow but came into their own. Mac Jones with 3 touchdown passes. Dolphins, fantastic. Tua was brilliant. Had nearly 450 passing yards. Tyreek Hill just blew the Chargers, the DBs away. And I'm really, really struggling with this one. I'm pretty much down to a coin flip, but I will go with the Patriots winning by 1.
Well, that's not biased now.
That's not biased. I just think that Bill Belichick's game preparation, it is at Gillette Stadium. It's there. I think that they can just have enough. At Dolphins is Patriots' big bogey game of the season, but at Gillette Stadium, historically, it has been, a Patriots win, and I can see that continuing for now.
Lawson, didn't you play the Dolphins when you went to Gillette Stadium?
Did, mate, and they lost. Good night, everybody. No, mate, you're absolutely right. That was Fitzmagic, though, so not Tua. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the Patriots by 1 in Sunday night football. Kemp, you've already been, mate, so I'm gonna go.
I have, mate.
Yeah. Sorry, mate. It was that forgettable. I forgot. Aggie closes off with the Thursday night football and Sunday night football predictions. Vikings at Eagles and Dolphins at Patriots.
I'm also going to go with an Eagles win, but I'm going to go with 6 points. I don't think it's going to be quite as distant as you guys think. Certainly not to the 3 scores that 17 offers, but I think, it's going to be a case of the last drive of the game is going to be the Vikings. There's going to be a pick thrown in there or something. They're going to fail on 4th down, and the Eagles just take the need to finish it off. So I think 6 points will be enough for the Eagles to win that one. And I think the Dolphins are that offense that the Dolphins have is just too quick and too good for most teams. And while the Patriots did perform very well against the Eagles, despite going 3 scores down to begin with, I'm going to have to give it in favour of the Dolphins. And I'm going to say 13 points in the Dolphins' favour.
I think that Dolphins Chargers game, just an absolute shootout, wasn't it? And I don't think anybody quite thought the Dolphins defense would have been as bad as it was. That was quite concerning. They looked all the world like they've got probably one of the best cornerbacks pairings in the league, and it just really, really poor defensive performance from them. Offensively, probably one of the best offensive performances in the league. Tua and Tyreek were just automatic time and time again. There's always that famous "fuck it," Tyreek's somewhere down there and just throwing it downfield.
I don't know if you saw, just very quickly on that, Tyreek, credit to him in terms of sort of noticing what was happening in the trends, but he went to Tua and basically said, I've got these on a go route based on how they were scheming against him, and then the next play was a touchdown on quite a deep throw, so yeah, it was pretty much a send it. I reckon I've got this kind of thing.
Yeah, they were just not offering any kind of support against Tyreek Hill. I think it was JC Jackson. That's one of your old boys, isn't it, JC Jackson? And he had one of the worst games the quarterback could have possibly had, and there wasn't giving him any help whatsoever. So, I think it's going to be a really tough ask for this Patriots team to keep up with Miami. I think that's probably going to be, they're going to want to make sure this game's, a 13-18 sort of game, 13-17 sort of game, because if this scoring gets ahead of itself, I just cannot see that Patriots offense keeping up with Miami's.
Yeah, I think Ramsey's back as well, isn't he? On defense, Ramsey will be back.
Yeah, they want to slow it down like fuck, don't they? Like Burnley or Stoke at home in Premier League, like in their primes. They want to slow this fucker down because Tua Tagovailoa, 466 yards, 3 touchdowns and an interception against in obviously the previous game, and Tyreek Hill 11 receptions, 215 yards and 2
ridiculous,
touchdowns, which is fucking terrifying.
He said he wants over 2,000, didn't he, this year? Tyreek, I'm sure I've heard somebody say he wants to be the first receiver to make 2,000 receiving yards in a season.
But he's gone the right way about it.
It's on track for about 3,600. So he's
the Patriots warm up properly because he might break a few ankles, and it's going to be a very, very tough game for the Patriots cornerback.
Imagine me jockeying with my calves.
I don't know if you've seen, but this past week during training, Patriots actually flew in Tony Pulis to help them set up for the game on Sunday. I wish I'd never said it. I've got headphones on. But anyway, that is episode 68, lads. I don't know about you, but it's fucking great to talk about NFL that's happened and NFL that's stuck on. I think it's really going to round off our episodes nicely. We all want to talk about football. Some of us want to talk about combats and F1 and things like that. So really, really happy that the NFL is back. And look, it's going to be really interesting to see what's happening over the next few weeks, especially like Aaron Rodgers. Anything can happen at any given moment that completely changes the landscape of a division, of a conference, and ultimately the league as a whole. So, really interesting to see what's going to happen over the next few weeks. But let's talk about weekends. Aggie, you've officially signed on the dotted line. You've officially confirmed your first game as a Flash Score commentator for next weekend. So what have you got this upcoming weekend, mate? Or 2 weeks away, sorry, should I say. So we're a little bit away yet. So are you working, as you would say, or are you giving yourself a little bit of breathing space and a little bit of chill time before your new career as a Flash Score commentator kicks in?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the air quotes
I was just about to say, that's so belittling you. Are you working? Yeah. That's so patronising.
It's commentating. That's not work, is it? Come on.
Fucking hell.
Anyway, I'll be working on Saturday. I've got 2 Saturdays left with the current radio station I'm working at covering Staveley. And then, it's on to Flash Score. My first game is going to be West Ham United against Sheffield United. So a nice little game to get me started, but looking forward to that. And of course, on Sunday, Seahawks are 6 o'clock kickoff. So there's no worries about, having to stay up late, finishing at half 11, 12 o'clock, anything like that. So I can get that game out of the way and then just chill in bed. And when I fall asleep, I fall asleep. So good weekend.
Fair. Kempy, Aggie just mentioned Sheffield United there, and as I know already, after our recent trip to London, you've said for many a year how much you dislike the capital of England, but yet again you are making the trip down south. So talk us through your plans for this weekend.
Yeah, Saturday the 16th of September, Sheffield United away at Tottenham Hotspur at the 3:00 kickoff. I'm looking forward to it, to be fair. Looking forward to getting back to supporting the Blades after the international break. I'm not a big fan of international breaks, so I'm looking forward to getting back to club football. And I'm also looking forward to seeing the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium because, by all reckoning, the pictures I've seen and obviously Sam's experience watching the NFL there, it's a pretty beautiful sight to behold. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to the pint that fills up from the bottom. And then Sunday might be playing a bit of football myself as well. So it's going to be a football-orientated weekend. And then hopefully we get a Giants win on Sunday as well. But I'm not going to ask for too much, so we'll leave it there.
Well, very quickly, mate, I wish I could fill you up from the bottom or in the bottom. But Sam, the reason I did it in that order was because I knew Kemp was going to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this weekend. Two questions. A, are there any tips that you can offer him for his experience to make it even better this weekend? And B, what, of course, have you got planned for this upcoming weekend?
In regards to Tottenham, not really. It was a completely different experience to football. Obviously, he's just going to the bar, going to the stands, where obviously mine was a bit more of like a bit of a festival sort of thing. Obviously, you've got your tailgate for your NFL all around, so it were a bit more to take in. I've already said, obviously, the pint that fills up from the bottom, I've already told him, don't fuck about with the hole in the bottom because you will fucking get covered in beer. They do leak as well, which is a bit weird. Even when you don't fuck about it, just kind of you put it on a coaster and you'll notice it's a coaster. Who's got a fucking coaster at a football match?
I did wonder. New stadium, but they're looking after you there, aren't they?
Fucking hell. It's not bad, is it? What am I on about there? Fucking hell. If you put your beer on your floor and that, you notice there's going to be a little bit of a puddle where you've left your beer. So that's my one tip. Don't fuck about with a little circle at the bottom of your pint glass. As for my weekend, Saturday, I will be going to the glorious Prix Park Stadium. And I'll be watching Derby. I'll be watching Derby.
Fucking kept that quiet.
I'll be watching Derby County versus Portsmouth.
Up the Rams.
I've bought my old man a ticket for his birthday, bless him. So me and my old man are going to go and watch Derby at the weekend. That's pretty much it for Saturday. And then Sunday, it's just all about NFL. It's all about NFL. And these weekends are just so much fucking better. When I know at 6 o'clock, I've got Red Zone at 6. Well, I don't think I've got Red Zone. I don't know what time we're on, actually. I'll have to double check that.
I'll tell you now. Keep talking, mate, and then I'll let you know.
Yeah, Packers-Falcons. I'm not 100% sure. My dream scenario is what we have. 6 o'clock, is it? Yeah, that's a bit of a shame, but it means I'll be watching Packers from 6 and Red Zone from 9:30. So it's not end of the world, but I do like to watch the start of Red Zone, to be fair. That's my weekend. From 6 o'clock, I'll be watching the Eagles on Eagles. Where the fuck have I got Eagles from? I think I'm as pissed as you. I'll be watching the Packers Falcons in Atlanta from 6 p.m. on Sunday, and I cannot fucking wait to watch some more Jordan Love. Oh, I've also just I finally made my decision on the Packers jersey that I've gone for as well. Obviously, I've said on this, I've been toing and throwing with a couple of players. All my Packers jerseys are completely outdated. I've got 2 Rodgers shirts. I've got a Clay Matthews jersey. I've got a...
Bakhtiari, haven't you?
No, I ain't got Bakhtiari, no. I've got, fucking hell, Charles Woodson. I've got a Charles Woodson jersey.
Fucking hell, that is outdated.
That's quite outdated. And I've realised I've not got an actual current Packers player jersey now. So I've gone for the rookie first round pick, Kyle Van Ness, number 90, ordered today. It comes to 3 to 5 business days. So hopefully this time next week, I will be wearing my new Packers jersey for the podcast.
Happy days, mate. Can't wait for that one. Not that anybody cares, but I've got absolutely no plans for the weekend. Gonna have a film day on Saturday with Tommy and DG, and then Sunday, yes, mate, it will be NFL. And my perfect scenario: Patriots are playing through the night, so I can enjoy Red Zone and then not have to watch Patriots lose. So that's perfect.
Hey, you don't watch fucking Patriots anyway. You do so much.
He's moved chair already.
Fucking hell.
Patriots lose. That's 5 minutes after he's picked him to win.
Give me one film you'll be watching Saturday with T-Bone and DG.
Well, we've got a list. So we're going to spin the wheel.
I love it. Love shit like that.
Yeah. So we've had a bit of a thing on it. It's been a Friday evening thing where we've put a film on that's sort of from our childhood, like a Mrs. Doubtfire, for an example, that he's not seen. That's from our childhood. So we've got
Squid Game, something like that.
Yeah. We're watching that at the minute.
I know.
We've got what's one of the films? Bolt, which is a Disney film. I've never seen it.
Yeah, I've not seen it, but I know what it is. The white dog.
Yeah,
John Travolta.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we watched the trailer the other day. Real Steel with Hugh Jackman.
Oh, that's a bit shit.
Oh, brilliant! I'll leave it then. We'll open next week with a review of it. But yeah, just a couple of films. We're gonna go shopping tomorrow night. We're gonna treat it like full on cinema day. So get the popcorn in, get snacks in, everything.
Get
like
some
that.
hot dogs.
Saturday we don't have to leave the house, and it's just gonna be literally like just watch films and shit like that all day. Yeah, probably a little bit, a little bit that as well. Aggie. Episode 68 is in the books, mate. Give our viewers and listeners that, bless them, have fucking sat through us right till the end. Give them an inspirational quote to get them through the next week.
I haven't got an inspirational quote, mate.
Inspirational as ever.
Yeah,
absolutely. See you next week, everybody.
Bye.